Chapter 10. Gorge was in a tough spot. He was bloodied and all alone. The man, known as Jackal, stood before him, also oozing blood from his wounds, his blonde hair stained with that blood and grease. His brown eyes showed some amusement in his situation. He smiled, showing off that set of hand-sharpened teeth that had actually taken a chunk of Gorge's flesh at one point. Jackal's troops were either dead or had fled. Jackal and his men had plucked off every single one of Gorge's troops, leaving him the only survivor. Not one to leave the job half finished, Jackal ordered his men to hunt down Gorge. This left Gorge ample opportunity to pluck off Jackal's men. At some point, the remainder of them had lost their nerve and fled. This led Gorge to a close-quarters fight with Jackal, leaving them both in rough shape. They both stood there, trying to regain their stamina while waiting for the other to make the first move. Then the alarm shrieked, signaling for the fighting to stop and that the match was over. Jackal's grin spread even wider, and Gorge's mind finally thought of something that wasn't in front of him. His face went pale, and he sprinted towards the middle of the arena. Gorge saw Sly looking up at the sky, standing above a body that must have been Shay. He looked battered, a combat knife buried in his forearm, but overall, he was alive. That was a good sign. Sadly, that was the only good sign. Bodies littered the ground. Gorge recognized the mon's clothing on what was left of a body. There was no sign of the kids, but Gorge remembered they would be somewhere up high, like that 2-story building on their side. Gorge sprinted around the back of the building and climbed the ladder. To his horror, he met a body at the top of the ladder just a meter away. "Shit," he said aloud. He knew it wasn't Millie with the jacket and boots not being hers, to his relief. He climbed up and saw it was Omar, a bullet right through the right side of his face. He then saw Millie up against a wall, curled up in a ball with her face buried in her chest and her hands covering her head. Her eyes were slammed shut. "Millie!" Gorge yelled. She didn't react, and he walked towards her. She looked up, her eyes wide with terror. Gorge slowly crouched down next to her. It looked like she hadn't taken a hit. He grabbed her in a bear hug. She was trembling from either the cold or fear, probably both. He didn't know how long he held her like that, but he heard a man screaming with rage. Jackal. Gorge let go of Millie and looked out the window. He could easily hear what Jackal was saying. "You just let her get executed?" Jackal screamed at his teammates. "You knew her orders," one of the men shot back. "She wanted no interference from us, no matter the outcome." Jackal turned to Shade's corpse, and then to Sly, who was still staring up at the sky, seemingly unaware of Jackal's presence. Jackal had a look of bloodlust in his eyes. He screamed and charged Sly with a killing intent. Jackal was shot halfway through his charge and collapsed. Not a speck of blood came from that wound. It was a tranquilizer shot that brought the animal down. The guards had arrived. They were decked from head to toe in body armor. Dr. Glad wasn't with them. Gorge turned to Millie. "We need to get moving." She slowly nodded but didn't move. Her gaze was back on Omar. Gorge was at a loss. He didn't know what to do. A guard climbed up the ladder. He was dressed the same as the others. His face behind that standard Hyperix helmet, the yellow visor staring intently at them. "You two injured?" the guard asked in an unconcerned tone. "Not physical," Gorge muttered. He knew when the men asked if they were injured, he really meant if they could move. The guard didn't care how much cuts or scrapes Gorge had. "Then you two need to get down from here," the guard replied, adding a bit of steel to his tone. "Show a bit of humanity, son," Gorge hissed, getting a bit pissed at the man before him. He motioned to Millie. The guard looked down at the body of Omar. The guard's posture didn't change, but he tapped something under his chin, probably a comlink. There was a sound behind him, like something retracting. "Ma'am," the guard said softly, "we're going to have to move the body." He then proceeded to pull a large black cloth from his pack. He slowly draped the cloth over Omar. He then pulled the body to the side. It still left a large stain of blood in the snow. The guard still kept his distance from them, giving Gorge time to get Millie moving. "At least the man's trying," Gorge thought. He got Millie to her feet, and they slowly trudged to the ladder. He got Millie to walk around the stain of blood. To Gorge's surprise, the ladder was replaced with a ramp. That was a sigh of relief for Gorge. He doubted Millie could get down the ladder in the state she was in. Sly was waiting at the bottom of the ramp, the knife in his forearm gone. Sly took stock of them and slowly shook his head in sadness. "We'll meet the others at the exit tunnel," he whispered. "Those who managed to survive, at least." Gorge just replied with a nod, and they slowly made their way over. Roger, Connor, Kristen, and a middle-aged woman from Sly's center squad were waiting by the exit. Roger and Connor's eyes lit up with relief at seeing Millie, while Kristen just showed concern and sadness. The middle-aged woman nodded at everyone and left down the exit tunnel. "Glad to see you on your feet, sir," Roger said. "And good to see you with us, Millie," Connor also chimed in. Millie didn't reply. She had a distant look in her eyes while still holding Gorge's hand. Gorge just shook his head, a motion that said this was not the time to celebrate. "Is this everybody?" Kristen asked sadly, then shook her head as if she answered her own question. "No, I haven't seen anyone in your squad, Gorge. Why the hell are they taking their sweet time?" "'Cause they're dead," Gorge stated coldly. Millie winced, but Sly didn't react. He had drawn that conclusion when that freak jackal arrived before any more friendlies. "Dead? They've all been killed?" Kristen cried. "That's what I said," Gorge replied through gritted teeth. "Most of their troops lost their lives as well." "And that justifies the loss of life?" Kristen pushed. Gorge got up right into her face. "You're on very thin ice. I tried." Sly got in between both of them. "Leave it. What's done is done." They went through the casualties of their squads. Sly's face paled as they got the total. Out of the 36 people in the squad, 22 had died. Kristen had heard about Amon's death from Connor. She didn't need to ask about Omar. Millie's appearance was enough of a confirmation. Kristen left for the stands. Roger and Connor opted out and left for the barracks. Gorge knew the smart move would be to follow Kristen up. With it being so clear they could die any day now, information on the other teams was critical. The sensible move, however, would be to get Millie as far away from this arena as possible. Maybe find Dr. Glad or something. Gorge decided to go for the sensible move. "Hey, Pinky, let's go see if we can find Dr. Glad," Gorge suggested. Sly rose a brow, clearly not agreeing with that. "Why?" Millie muttered, not taking her eyes off the ground. "Well, it might be best to check with the doctor to see how we're doing." That was a poor excuse. Gorge knew it was obvious how well they were doing. "And probably getting away from this place would be for the best." "I don't think it matters where we go," Millie whispered. "It doesn't change anything." Gorge had to strain to hear what she said. She was so quiet. Yet, her words still struck Gorge's heart. "I get your intentions, Gorge," Sly cut in, "but after being in the middle of that mess, I don't think any of us are going to be worse for wear sitting in the stands." Gorge wasn't so sure about that, but he knew he wasn't able to convey a strong enough argument against it. They went up to the stands where they met up with Kristen and Chase. Chase looked like a ghost of his former self, just looking out into the arena with a deadpan look. Sly also looked out to the arena and whistled in surprise. The entire arena grounds were gone, dropped into the ground itself. A new arena rose up from its place with a different layout as well. "That's one way to clean up a mess," Sly noted in awe. "And the other teams are none the wiser," Gorge muttered. Chase finally looked up at the new arrivals and cracked a little bit of a smile when he saw Millie. That little smile faded away as quickly as it appeared when he really got a good look at Millie, and also noticed Omar wasn't by her side. Where's... Chase tried to ask, but got choked up before he could finish. He felt like he knew the answer, and when Gorge just shook his head gravely, Chase understood. His gaze went back to the arena and acted like the others never came back. Everyone took seats to spectate what madness would unfold before them. Gorge and Millie took a seat at the end, the opposite end from Chase. Time passed in mostly silence till the next match. Millie was in a mindless trance. She just stared with as much of a deadpan look as Chase. Gorge saw people starting to enter from both sides of the arena. He recognized Illis as clear as day. Her Team 8, the all-woman, one-boy squad, looked fierce and ready to go. Gorge didn't recognize the other team, except for one man, Ace Kraft. Gorge remembered he went to Squad 9, led by Autumn Lightning. Gorge did have the sick thought that maybe this coming bloodbath would wipe Ace's arrogance, and he would show a bit more of a humane side that the rest of them were feeling. He also questioned if Ace would kill Illis in the same playful way he did to the others outside the ward. The buzzer blared to life and the match began. The map had crates stacked together in random shapes scattered all over. Ace sprinted off, leaving his other companions in the dust. "Damn it, Ace!" one of them yelled. Ace shrugged and called back, "There's no ace in team, baby!" He sprinted down the south side, hugging the wall and darting in between crates. With his speed and skill, he managed to get to the enemy lines without being seen. He spun around a 2-stack crate and caught a young girl by surprise. Before she could do anything, Ace rose his heavy handgun and fired. The first shot of the match, and it was a brutal one through the head. "Oh shit!" Ace laughed with surprise. "That's one permanent autograph." Some women on the battle line opened fire. "Whoa!" Ace spun back into cover as bullets glanced by. He fired 2 shots back, but the women engaging him had other problems. Ace's main force had started their part of the firefight. Ace saw an enemy group setting up positions in front of him. He decided to take the fight to them, ignoring the women who initially started shooting at him. He darted from crate to crate, sliding through the snow and dodging bullets. He plucked off the group one by one with fancy moves and throwing out a quip here and there, all while having the time of his life. "Illis, my girl," Ace called as he saw her walk in his direction, giving her the finger guns. Illis's expression was cold with little emotion. "Nothing? Come." In a flash, Illis threw a knife that embedded in Ace's upper arm. Ace seemed more taken by surprise than in pain. Ace rose his handgun to shoot, but he was too slow. Illis had closed the ground in between them. "She drew a fucking sword?" She sliced clean through the barrel of the handgun, followed with a kick to Ace's ribs that staggered him. She then went into a midair flip, guiding her blade with her and slashed at Ace. The blade nicked Ace's left collarbone and went downwards, leaving a large, bloody gash down Ace's chest. Ace continued to stagger back into the crates behind him. As soon as his back touched the crates, he rolled to the left, dodging the sword that would have impaled him. Clearly, Illis had no qualm in killing him. Ace rolled through the snow and rose his gun to fire. He hesitated, realizing the barrel was still gone. He tossed the gun away. He didn't have time to draw his second handgun before Illis was on him once again. Ace rolled backwards and onto his feet, drawing Illis's knife from his upper arm. He used it to parry her onslaught of blows. Ace could start to feel a trickle of blood in his mouth. He gathered a glob and spit it in Illis's face. Not very gentlemanly, but he was in a tough spot. The move broke Illis's coordination, and Ace wanted to follow up with a good punch to her face, but she dropped to a backward somersault, giving Ace some breathing room. He drew his other handgun. He then got shot from behind, the bullet going straight through his left arm. Ace cursed, spinning around, and fired. He killed his attacker, the boy of Illis' squad, before he could fire another shot. He spun back to see Illis about to throw her sword like a javelin at Ace. He made a split-second decision. He would drop Illis with a couple of shots now and deal with the flying sword moments later, probably taking it in his body. He had to end this fight now. Before any of them could go through with their moves, the buzzer blared to life, signaling the end of the match. They both instantly froze. Ace knew the guards looking over the arena would shoot both of them if they continued, and those shots might not be the normal tranks. Illis had the same thought. She dropped her sword to the ground. Ace followed suit with his gun. "Guess this ended well for the both of us," Ace said, trying not to show how much pain he was in. Illis just looked at him with a murderous cold look as the guards approached. Gorge was too busy watching the fight between Ace and Illis to see how the overall battle had ended. Gorge scanned the arena and could easily make out what had happened. A small group of Illis's women had pierced Lightning's front line. They eventually got to Autumn. She laid at the back of her side of the arena, her eyes wide and distant. Several blades were pierced in her neck slashed. Ace seemed undisturbed about the outcome of the match. He walked out of the arena as his usual self, just in a bit more pain. His leader had just been killed along with whom knows how much of his teammates, and he got his ass kicked by Illis. Gorge was pretty sure Ace hadn't laid a single blow on her, besides that cheap spit of blood. He still seemed in good spirits like normal, though. The group in the stands were quiet for a long while, until Sly noticed, "Both sides sure lost a lot." Gorge nodded. I doubt any group is gonna get out of this mess unscathed. Kristen just shrugged. The kids were just watching the arena, seeming to be in their own little worlds. Gorge whispered into Sly's ear, "How much of this are we gonna watch?" Sly shrugged. "I'm in it for the information. You already tried to get out of this with Millie and it didn't pan out." Gorge just sighed in defeat at that one. It took a bit for the arena to clear out and the next squads to enter. The match was going to be between Soy Young's Squad 1 and Che Webblock's Squad 12. Gorge didn't recognize any of the combatants. The match went about as well as expected. Both sides suffered heavy losses. Ultimately, Webblock was victorious, with Young meeting a grisly fate. No one made any comments on that match. The next match was between Stanley Summers' Squad 6 and Cloud McVaughn's Squad 11. Gorge saw Millie's face got a bit paler. Gorge might not have recognized anyone out there, but Millie sure did. She saw Binks and Sierra Muse out there. She remembered Binks' kindness in helping her out with her clothes. Sierra was also thoughtful enough to make a couple of changing rooms for the others as well. They were a part of Squad 6. The map had an interesting component to it. Each side had tall 45-foot towers with a small sniper box on top, a similar experience that Sly's squad had on their second match. The buzzard blared to life and the match started. Binks sprinted for the sniper tower, while Sierra pushed to the front lines. Summers stayed back with a couple of troops. Binks got into position with his heavy sniper rifle. He instantly shot and killed the opposing team's sniper. Binks blinked with a moment of surprise. However, that didn't stop him from taking shots at the opposing team below. Binks was good, a master sniper. He didn't miss a single shot he took. Cloud's men were bunkered down on their front line. Cloud himself was in the action, a pale-skinned man in his late 40s who wore a cowboy hat over his bald head. They were taking a beating from Binks and the opposing side's barrage of bullets. "Sal!" Cloud yelled. "The sniper tower! Take the shot, now!" Sal was a rocket launcher user. With the fatal bullets and all, one rocket should be able to blow that tower to pieces. "Are you crazy?" Sal called back. "He'll kill me before I can fire a shot. We'll all be dead in the snow if that tower doesn't go down." Sal gave a fearful croak, but still loaded the rocket into the launcher. In one swift motion, he spun out of the cover and fired. As soon as the rocket left the launcher, Sal received a sniper bullet to the chest. He collapsed into the snow, dead. The rocket had hit its mark. The top of the tower exploded and Binks flew from the blast. He slammed on top of some crates, rolled off of them, and fell to the snowy ground below, not moving. Millie gasped with fear from witnessing such a fall. Sierra saw the tower explode, and she fell back from the front lines. A young, dark-skinned girl from Cloud's cover charged the enemy's side. She was like a blur, dodging bullets and throwing a knife here and there. "Damn it, Sindel!" Cloud cried. Sindel flipped over the enemy's cover, taking a young man as a human shield. She drew his sidearm and fired at some of the other combatants, dropping a couple of them in the process. She then snapped her hostage's neck and continued her path of destruction. Cloud cursed and mantled over his cover. "Charge!" he screamed as he rushed the enemy while opening fire. The others of his squad followed his lead, giving a united battle cry. The enemies that foolishly didn't retreat were quickly overrun. Cloud and his men mantled over the enemy cover and quickly massacred them. Sierra sprinted down her backlines to where Binks had flown. She found him crumpled in the ground right in the middle of the pass. Not wasting any time, she quickly chucked his weapon on top of the line of crates. She then dragged him to the opposite side. She quickly dug out a cubbyhole in the snow for the two of them under the crate. She pushed the unconscious Binks in. She followed him in the hole, trying her best to cover her tracks. Some of her teammates came running down the pass, only to get shot by the enemy behind them. The enemy ran straight by Sierra's hiding spot, heading to Summers' location. Cloud had Summers boxed in. Summers only had a handful of individuals left by his side. Knowing the situation was pointless, Summer threw away the rifle and came out. "We surrender." Cloud held up his hand. "Hold!" he commanded his men. No one fired a shot. Technically, the match was over, yet the buzzer didn't come to life to signal such an end. Cloud could see out of the corners of his vision that the arena guards up above were raising their rifles up to take some shots. So, surrendering wasn't an option. Cloud cursed and slowly rose his own rifle. Killing a surrendering opponent was one of the worst things you could do in battle from Cloud's perspective. Stanley Summers must have seen what was going to happen as well and put 2 and 2 together. He screamed defiantly as he drew his sidearm before Cloud could react. Stanley then shot himself, the bullet going clean through the skull. He dropped to the snow as a girl on his side screamed. "No!" she wailed as she sprinted towards him. She knelt down. Stanley? She screamed as the buzzer came to life, bringing the match to a close as the girl's screams echoed through the arena. Millie gagged, got up, and vomited in the corner. And for fuck's sake, Gorge couldn't blame her. Out of everything that happened today, that suicide was the most brutal thing Gorge had witnessed. Sly was just shaking his head in disbelief. Kristen was able to mask her emotions, while Chase just still had that deadpan look on his face, as if he hadn't even noticed what had just transpired in front of him. "I think I'm done here," Gorge muttered, trying to compose himself. "I don't fucking blame you one bit on that," Sly replied. Gorge went over and gently rested his hand on Millie's shoulder. She nodded without looking at him, and they both left for the stands, leaving the others behind. They made their way back to the barracks with a quiet walk. Millie still had concerns about Binks' survival. "I can't say that man's doing well," Gorge was saying, "but at least he made it out of that arena." "How do you know that?" Millie asked. "I believe it was his sister that went to his aid. Saved him with that under the crate stunt," Gorge explained as he took a seat on a bunk. "Although that fall looked pretty bad. Could be some severe spinal damage there." That didn't seem to raise Millie's spirits much. "At least he's still alive," Gorge finished. "I think I'm gonna go out for a walk or something," Millie said. Gorge nodded. They both needed something to help process today's events. For Millie, it sounded like a walk. For Gorge, it was just lying down. Millie left, leaving Gorge and a couple other dismayed individuals in the barracks. Gorge sat in his thoughts for a time, thinking of the past. An hour must have went by, and he decided to go out and find Millie. He really didn't know where to start. He didn't think she was roaming aimlessly. She wouldn't be at the cafeteria with the amount of people that could be there. He knew going to the medical tents would be pointless, since if you didn't have an injury, they'd shoo you away like a rat. Showers? No. Maybe the training yard. He decided that would be the best bet and made his way over. His hunch paid off when he found Millie firing the same non-lethal rounds downrange with her signature rifle. There were just a handful of people practicing at the field, all keeping as much distance from each other as possible. He noticed that Millie just kept firing and reloading rounds. She must have been doing this non-stop since she got here. It wasn't healthy. He could see her arms shaking, and this time he doubted it was from the cold. "Binky," he called as he approached. "Hey." It seemed like she didn't hear him. He waited for her to start to load another round and rested a hand on her shoulder. She twirled to face him, almost leaping back in surprise. "What the hell are you doing?" Gorge chided. I... She looked like she was about to break. She was shaking uncontrollably, a hot tear rolling down her cheek. He gave her a hug. He could feel some of the tension in her lessen. Poor damn kid, Gorge thought. She reminded him of some of the younger kids in his life. The kids back in his war-torn homeland. The kids that lost everything, but still picked themselves up and tried to make improvements where they could. Millie broke off and wiped a tear from her face. "Thanks," she managed to say. "You're going at this all wrong, kid," Gorge said. "Huh?" she replied with a bit of fire and defense. Gorge managed to crack a grin at that. "You're trying to improve your skills, but you're starting at the end instead of the beginning," he replied. She looked at him skeptically. "You can't expand a home without the proper supports. It'll just collapse." "Can we stop with the metaphors?" she sniffled. "You had trouble holding the rifle before, and you think that just firing it over and over again will help?" Gorge shook his head. "Nuh-uh." "But I'm improving," Millie countered. "At what cost?" Gorge corrected. Millie frowned, not having an answer. "You need to fit the body into the weapon. You need to improve your arm strength, your core, your stamina," he went on. "That's where you start, not shooting down the range with a gun that's difficult to hold and hurting your muscles." Millie sighed, a bit defeated. "The basics, huh?" "Yep." Gorge replied. He knew her arms weren't in the best shape with the firing she did. Your arms might be a bit fucked, but your legs haven't seen any action. We'll jog around and back to the barracks. Take a break and start on a bit of a workout routine. Millie looked like she was considering the proposition. If you're up for it, of course. I guess it's better than nothing, she answered. Or better than what you're doing, Gorge replied playfully. Millie forced a grin at that remark. They jogged back to the barracks, the snow crunching under their feet. The barracks was still as lifeless as when Gorge had left. No one new had returned yet. So, what's next? Millie asked eagerly, seeing something else to focus on. Gorge was starting to reconsider the workout regimen idea. The girl had already gone through a lot in one day, and Gorge knew there was absolutely no way they were getting a day of rest anytime soon. I think it'll be best to take what we have left of the day and just rest, Gorge said to Millie's disappointment. Napoleon didn't dominate Europe in one day. Who? Oh boy, Gorge muttered. Knowledge is another way to improve yourself. When you get out of here, read some books. History is a good starting point. Learn from the past, not repeat it. Right? When I get out of here, Millie quietly contemplated the thought. Do you think that'll actually happen? Gorge didn't want to give the girl false hope, but he did have some faith that what he said could happen. I do, he answered. They won't keep such prime talent here forever. And he laughed, trying to add some good cheer. It seemed to have a positive effect on Millie, while others just looked at him with disdain. Whatever positive effect that was quickly disappeared when the rest of the main group, Sly, Kristen, and Chase, got back, reminding Millie and Gorge of what they lost. Millie and Kristen went to try to talk with Chase, who was still lost in his own misery. Gorge got with Sly. How did the rest go? Gorge asked. Sly sighed. Nothing spectacular. A lot of our time was just spent trying to get Chase to leave. Gorge nodded sadly. We're not even a week into this. I believe this massacre marks the 5th day we've been on this mountain. Don't you think this shit's going way too fast? Gorge asked. For my liking on death camps? Yeah, probably. Sly replied with a bit of sarcasm. You know what I mean, jackass. Gorge shot. At this rate, we will all be dead by the end of the week. Sly was quiet for a moment, then said, I thought this was going a bit too fast before today. This started out with a couple hundred of us, right? Gorge nodded in confirmation. And the rumored goal is that a super soldier team is supposed to come from this, right? I mean, I guess. The question is, Sly continued, how big is that squad supposed to be? 36? 12? 5? Fuck, it could be as low as 3 or 2. They could have several projects like this and pick the best person from each. I think that last one might be a bit of a stretch. Maybe, but the point is, why train hundreds? For a super squad, there isn't a reason, Gorge replied. Sly nodded. Yep, I think they'll at least try to get our numbers down to below 50 before we see a day without fighting. I doubt they're gonna do another arena fight, though, Gorge pointed out. Sly nodded in agreement. Not the same team setup, at least. Too much of a difference in the loss of life for each team. Gorge nodded as well, looking over at Millie, Kristen, and Chase. Sly followed his gaze. I'm surprised. Millie is holding up way better than I would have expected. Gorge agreed. I don't think Chase is going to be following suit. Has he spoken at all? Maybe a whisper here and there, Sly answered. It doesn't look like they're going to be changing that, Gorge noted. He just needs a bit of time. Time that we don't fucking have, Gorge stated. Sly couldn't argue with that. Let's see if we can get something to eat, no? And that was a question that Gorge couldn't argue with. They weren't able to move Chase, so Kristen stayed with him. Just see if he can bring back some bread or fruit, she had said as the others left. The evening dinner was uneventful. With dull food and dull conversation, there was no cheer to be had. The cafeteria wasn't as packed as usual for one reason or another. Gorge and Millie ate their meals in relative silence, making idle chit-chat with others from time to time. They made it back to the barracks sometime later. Sly brought with him some bread and 2 apples for Kristen and Chase. The situation hadn't changed at the barracks. Chase was still trapped within himself. Kristen tried to give the boy the food that Sly had brought. However, Chase didn't seem interested. He ignored the food like he did with everything else. All in all, everyone seemed to want to call it an early day. The nightmares of the day had exhausted everyone. Some knew those nightmares would follow them into their sleep. Gorge climbed into bed, hoping he'd be able to escape the troubles of the day through sleep. The sax was not played that night.